All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Today I have a wonderful guest, Joe Eppele, out in Squamish. You may have seen him on his TV show. He's a co-host with On the Edge. And Joe and I met we were just talking about 8 years ago when he was playing in the CFL with the Ottawa Redblacks. And I wanted to get Joe on because I want to talk about all of the transitions that he's been through over the past 8 years. He went from being in the CFL to getting his MBA, to getting married, being a dad, moving back out to BC where his home is, and then having a full 9-to-5 job and being a TV host of a successful hunting show. Joe, why don't we talk about what I'm really interested in learning about is your transition after playing football, right? Because how big were you when you were actually in the CFL?
My peak weight early on in my career was in and around near 330, but the majority of my career was probably in the 305 to 310 range.
Right. And what I've seen over following you on Instagram is you've had a big transition in your body composition change, obviously from throwing humans around in football and we met in a gym, right? Because you loved lifting weights, and to now where you're out hunting in the field, walking up different terrain, and obviously as a dad and a husband looking at that more longevity aspect. What are 3 things that have changed in your nutrition that you've done to help you navigate through that change?
3 things that I've changed in my nutrition standalone. I mean, back when we were hanging out, like I was a big guy. I was constantly looking for ways to sneak more calories in, and it didn't matter, to be honest, at that stage of my life. It was good calories, bad calories, anything like that. I was just trying to get it in because the more I could bring in, I was trying to constantly keep my weight up. And now I'm doing the exact opposite. So I do a lot of like extreme, what would be considered extreme backcountry hunting, 10, 12, 14 days out of a backpack. So having that extra weight works against you. Big part of what I did is, to be honest, I learned from you where I started cutting a lot of grains out, cutting out those simple carbs, things like that. So high protein, a lot of vegetables in my diet, really, really upping my water intake. So watching those liquid calories, those would probably be some of the biggest changes I've made. My wife's also celiac, so it makes it really easy for us to make some of those modifications in our daily diet around here. And dairy, I'm still Haagen-Dazs guy. So in the evenings, it happens, but mostly dairy has been cut out of my diet as well. So those are some big things. And it works because those have also been big triggers for my arthritis. So I do have quite a bit of arthritis, surgeries and things like that back in my playing days. So I cut them out for weight loss reasons and a lot of other reasons. And then every now and then I try and add it back in, and I noticed like such a big impact on my health and my body. It's been an easy transition, but those would be the biggest changes I've made so far.
So for context, what would your diet look like when you're playing in the CFL? Like what would be a typical day of a 330-pound lineman? What would that look like?
Oh man, going back, I'd have to sit down and really think about it, but it was like eat anything we could get in front of us. I mean, to be honest, half the time it'd be a big breakfast at home if I could get it in, or a lot of time grabbing like a bunch of Timmy's breakfast wraps on my way into the office. Wouldn't be shy if I grabbed a donut or 2, throw it in my face, get to the locker room, maybe do some morning physio. And then quite often there'd be some like snack options in the locker room. So snack bars. I mean, when we were in Ottawa, you guys did a good job. We'd have, I think, the boiled eggs and some nuts and fruit and things like that once we were there. And then you'd go through your morning practices. And then as soon as I was out, like we would go and find the closest all you can eat. And it didn't matter what day of the week. It was like all you can eat wings, all you can eat ribs, all you can eat sushi, you name it. We were just stuffing our faces and just, again, packing down a lot and not being afraid of liquid calories. I think liquid calories were a big beast back then for us. I mean, even be it like a Guinness or 2 with lunch just to get that calories into the system. And then for dinner back then, I normally had like 1 or 2 big steaks, a ton of sweet potato fries or rice, and a salad. Like it's not like I was smashing McDonald's all the time or anything like that, but I was just constantly trying to get more and more and more into my body. And now it's more so about listening to my body and taking in what I need to take in.
And so are you comfortable sharing what's your weight now from 330 to where you are now?
Now, like right now in this moment, I'm probably around the 270 mark.
Okay.
And then during season, I'll go as low as the low 250s. I don't into the 240s on some of my hunts because you do cut a lot when you're on those extreme trips. I'd like to get lighter, but I think I'm holding on to the mentality.
And Just for context too, what's your height now?
Well, I'm just shy of 6'8", so 7 3/4.
Yeah, you're 6'8", so you're a tall boy. What are some of the benefits you did feel on your body after playing and then starting to lose that weight, right? Because there's going to be some people who didn't play sport who are losing weight, who may not be aware of what are some of the benefits that are going to happen if they, if you're 300 pounds, 30% body fat, and you go down to 250, what are some of the things that you felt on your body that you noticed the difference right away after losing some of that weight and changing around your body comp and your diet?
Some of the immediate changes I noticed right away, I mean, first and foremost was probably sleep quality. As I started dropping weight, just body pains. I've had 3 shoulder surgeries now, and I could find a comfortable position because I'm sure that was a lot of less stress on my body. But even just in general, I could get into that deep sleep and I felt really good. And then that goes along with that, my energy levels throughout the day. I think when I was having to take in so many calories, you go through those blood sugar peaks and valleys. So I'd spike and then bonk and spike and bonk, and you're chasing this all day. Whereas now I can have a more sustained diet, and my energy level throughout the day is just so much better. Mental clarity, everything that goes along with that. And then obviously just the impact. So my knees, my ankles, my hips, everything like that feels so much better throughout the day. I mean, in general, if you look at it, basically quality of life, the main things that you look for: lack of pain, better sleep, better energy. That's what you want. That's our goal. So yeah, just a spike in quality of life.
And so in regards to your training, how has your training changed? Because that's a dramatic, right? I mean, when you were in the CFL, you're talking Olympic lifting, powerlifting, rehab. Now you're out there hunting, hiking up and down the hills. Obviously, there's going to be some carryover in your exercise choices. How has your training adapted to this new style of living? Whatever you kept, what are 2 or 3 things that you've kept from your football days, and what are 2 or 3 new things that you've had to bring in to your training regimen to help you with your new sport, right? Because this is a sport, right? Hunting is no
Absolutely.
joke, right? Or life skill. We can call it many things.
Yeah. Certainly. I'm trying to think of things I've kept. I would say towards the end of my career, we started doing a lot of range of motion work. And obviously because of some of the injuries I had, we were doing a lot of stability work. So those are still very, very important. I'm on uneasy ground. I'm carrying unbalanced loads, things like that. So range of motion and stability are extremely important in what I do. But other than that, I mean, I used to push a ton of heavy weight, low, high weight, explosive, because that's what we did, right? We had bursts and then a break and then bursts. That's what our careers called for. Whereas now it's a lot of ongoing endurance activities that I'm doing. I'm hiking for 7 to 10 to 12 hours at a time, then sitting down glassing. And quite often you have a backpack on your back that can range anywhere from 35 pounds up to 80 pounds before you even have a successful hunt. Then you're coming out sometimes with 150 to 180 pounds, and you're still hiking out for 12 hours. Endurance training is way more of what I do now. I don't do a ton of weightlifting, especially with heavy weights. I do have some reoccurring or some injuries that we've mentioned or alluded to. So yeah, I've kind of moved away from, I don't do a ton of barbell work. I do a lot of body weight work, a lot of range of motion work, a lot of repetitive movements, focusing on the mechanics through the movements. And I do a lot more cardio. I wake up in the morning, 4:45, 5 a.m. And I typically either go for a trail run, more so than pavement running, because pavement takes a beating on your ankles and knees, but I do a trail run. Or on days when I need to be closer to the house, we have one of those stationary bikes here, and I'll jump on the bike and just make sure I get a good sweat in for 30 to 45 minutes in the morning. And I clock that distance. And that's what I've really noticed has a big impact in creating stronger stability around my knees, ankles, and hips. Yeah, it keeps me going in the backcountry.
I've noticed as I'm aging as well, because now I'm 43. I find running on pavement is horrific. And I find that I ride the bike more, or I like skipping, but I'm a big fan. When we used to have our cottage up in Tremblant, I would just go run in the trails. And I say to my wife, my knees don't hurt in the trail as much as they do on the pavement, but you have to be super aware when you're running trails. Because let's face it, I've wiped out so many times just running, listening to a good podcast, and you just kind of zone out. Next thing, tunk, and then your glasses are everywhere. You're rolling around on the ground, and it's there. But yeah, running in the hills is a totally different style of running.
I think, you mentioned you have to be a little bit more alert, but I think that uneven ground is a big part of why I enjoy it too, because we talk about stability muscles. If you get too used to just being on that perfect platform, that perfect flat surface, you lose a lot of that stability muscles, and then you get used to it. And then when you do get off country, like, it's easy because your body's just used to that perfect surface. Then you hit one rock that's off and you blow an ankle or something.
So I want to touch on something there that you talked about, which is like when you hunt. I've heard on different shows and stuff like that about when the animal has been caught, or let's say deceased, what is the fitness level that you need to get that animal out? Because if you're going in 14 kilometers into the bush, like I've seen on your Instagram, you go in with actually your mountain bike, right? But at that point, if you catch something, what is the fitness level of getting that animal out back home? Like, explain to me this process, because obviously I've never been hunting. I'm intrigued by it. So you tell us the story.
Yeah, so I mean, we always say, like, a big thing we say in the industry, a lot of people don't appreciate it or aren't aware of it, but like, the work starts once the animal's down. Everybody thinks all that, like, it's hard work to get the animal on the ground. Once the animal's on the ground, that's where the real work starts, because you're working against the clock, you're working against predators, grizzly bears, wolves, they might be coming in. You have to break that animal down. You have to legally, once you've made a harvest, you have to remove what it says every edible portion of meat has to be removed from that animal, and it has to come back to your place of, like, your residency, so wherever you live, your house. Which means, so for example, 2 years ago, my stone sheep hunt, shot a stone sheep, and I think I was 9 or 10 miles from the river that I was going to inflate my boat on and drift out a river. I'd hiked 9 or 10 miles as a crow flies, and vertical gain, I can't remember what the vertical gain is, but you start at river level and then you hike in the alpine, so you're above tree level, like up in the absolute peaks of these mountains. And I harvested this ram, and you have to bring out proof of gender, the head, like, so the horns. So I had to pack out the horns, which are heavy, probably 40 plus pounds. You have to completely process the animal on the hillside. So butcher the animal, put all of the meat into game bags. So you take all of that, you have to pack out the head, the meat, all of my camp, all of my gear, everything. We weighed my bag when I got back down the boat. It was probably around 160 to 170 pounds, because you have all of your gear. I'd been living in the mountains for 8 or 9 days before we had the harvest. So you're already fatigued too from being in the mountains. Now all of a sudden, all of your gear, you have your tent, your sleeping bag, your food, your stove, your firearms, your optics, everything. So it adds up really quick. All of that weight on your back, and now you have to get from the mountaintop back down to the bottom. And while you're coming down, you're going through grizzly bear territory, things like that. So you don't want to take too much time. I think from that stone sheep hunt, I think I hiked for, I think it was 12 or 14 hours straight. So we got back to the river bed like early next morning, and it's hiking through the night, that kind of weight on your backpack, downhill, no trails, like
in the bush,
untouched wilderness, picking your own trail, trying to read maps. You have your topo map and you're trying to figure out the right route, headlamp in the dark, hoping you don't bump into a grizzly bear. So it takes a lot, and that's why physical preparedness is so important. Mental preparedness. That's why, you have to keep pushing yourself mentally, because it's really easy mentally to break in those situations as well.
And how many persons are with you at this point? Is that you?
Typically on a hunt, it's myself and a cameraman. I've tried to limit my team as much as possible. Sometimes a guide with us, depending on where we are. Certain hunts you have to have with you.
What you're saying is, from the time you get the animal, you've made the shot. Mm-hmm. You now have anywhere between, so to butcher the animal, that's how long? So to get to the animal, from the time you shoot to get to the animals, probably could be an hour.
I've had to take 2+ hours, because depending on the terrain you are in, sometimes it's, especially when you're doing some of those extreme, like goat, sheep, or even a mountain caribou type hunt, you're up in the alpine, in the top, you're in shale, you're in cliffs, you're in rocks. So sometimes it's pretty treacherous to get into where the animal is. And then, once you get in there, you have to secure the animal so it doesn't roll down a hill or something, and you have to start processing it. Processing can take anywhere from, depending on where you're at, I've had to take anywhere from probably 1 to 3+ hours just processing an animal. Because you can imagine, like, a sheep is a smaller animal versus an elk. An elk is a big, monstrous animal. And then processing it, even just repositioning it to be able to start processing it, can be a job in itself.
Wow. So I'm just trying to visualize. Shoot, go in, 3 hours, then it's another 2 to 3, it's 5 hours. And then so it's like a 20, from the time you actually get the shot, it could be 24 hours before you're out of there.
Oh yeah, it can be a long process. Like, it's not uncommon for, you can have a morning or a midday shot, and keep in mind, we're filming while I'm in the field for what I do as well. So we have to film the recovery, film a lot of this, film some interviews by the animal, do justice, do some beauty shots of the animal and things like that. So it adds to it as well. Yeah, it can be a long process. There's a lot of times where you're getting back at early morning light the next day, or you have to sleep on the side of the hill and get back at whatever time the next day you get back at.
Have you had any close encounters with other animals after? So you got to give us one story. One of this is that's insane.
Yeah, one of probably the closest calls I've had. Well, I had a decent one this year with a big grizz, but last year, or 2 years ago now, maybe even 3 years ago now, I shot an elk in a very, very high, kind of a alpine bowl. And it was getting right close to last light. We had just ran out of water and ran out of food. Shot this bull. He went down and he died. He slid down this area and died in a very not ideal location. And we went down right away, started processing him, started packing up. And elk is a big, big animal. And when you're in steep country and nasty country, it makes it that much more challenging. So we started processing the animal, and the sun went down right away. So we had our headlamps on. So we break it down, get the animal mostly broken down, but you can't get an elk out in one pack because elks are huge. So we loaded our packs with as much as we possibly could and started hiking down. As we started hiking down, my headlamp started flickering. I only had one headlamp with me on this hunt, and my headlamp was dying. Hiking down, and I actually snagged my foot because my headlamp was dying. I snagged my foot on a branch, hiking downhill, and I tripped into the dark head first. And as my head hit the ground, I smashed my eye in. As my head hit the ground, my backpack came from behind, hit me in the back of the head, and the momentum drove my head into the ground harder and flipped me farther into the dark. And I was lying there. I just called my cameraman. I was like, come take a look at my face. Tell me how screwed we are. Luckily, I just kind of split open my eyebrow and messed my face up a bit. But if I had hit a rock or anything, it could have been lights out, right? Because you have 150 pounds driving your head into the ground, and then your body, and you flip. So we ended up having to stash the front quarter and a little bit of meat of this elk up a tree. And I marked it on my GPS, and we did some things so I knew where it was, got it up the tree as high as I could. And I said, okay, I'm going to recover it tomorrow, because I was showing some pretty severe concussion symptoms as well. So hey, it's getting pretty serious right now. So took as much on my bag as I could. We hiked back out. We got back into camp the next morning at 6 a.m, fatigued, exhausted, cramping. So took a few hours, got a bunch of water back into me, dropped off everything I had, then headed back up with a light pack because I wanted to go get the rest of the meat before anything happened. We're in very heavy grizzly population area.
Okay.
So we start hiking in, and as I'm getting close, I started noticing some fresh grizzly bear sign. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is not good, but hopefully this grizzly bear was just passing through, and it just so happens to be chances that this sign is here. It's not that he's right in the area. And I'm hiking in closer and closer, and all of a sudden I heard what I thought was some branches breaking, and I'm getting closer to this GPS location. This is getting really bad. Hiking on a little farther, and then all of a sudden, a grizzly bear, it's thick, braided alders, you can't see more than 8-10 yards plus. And all of a sudden I hear something very big charging at me through the bush and chomping its teeth, charging. And then grizzly bears, when they bluff charge, they stop and they stomp really hard. So it's heavy stomping and snorting, and you hear the teeth just, they're barking at you. So it stopped, and I just started yelling, hey bear, hey bear, hey bear. And kind of making a lot of noise, making it very apparent I'm not elk, or I'm a human. And the bear, I heard it retreat a little bit. So I thought, okay, this is me being young and dumb. Okay, I can push in. Maybe it's just, again, we're just passing here. And I pushed in a little bit closer, and the grizzly bear got really aggressive at this point. Bluff charged me all the way in. I hadn't actually seen it yet. Bluff charged me to 8 yards. And typically they say if a bear passes 15 yards, it's going to attack. Bluff charged me to 8 yards. I could see fur. I could see all the trees moving, and I could just see a big head. And again, started chomping and snorting at me and everything. At that point, I went, okay. Unfortunately, I had to give up on the meat at that point. It was clear that the bear had found the meat, had marked it, had taken it as his own. So I had to leave. But Yeah, I had a big grizzly bear bluff charge me to 8 yards, which is not a good feeling. You feel very small, very weak, and very soft in a situation like that. So we went back down and we actually ended up glassing and using my spotting scope and watching the grizzly bear up in the area it was. And it was a big enough grizzly bear. It could have got real interesting if he came in all the way.
Now, is your cameraman with you at this point?
On that specific circumstance, no, he wasn't. But then this year we had another situation. I had a mountain caribou on the ground and we had just finished processing it and I got a weird feeling. So I hiked up over the next little ridge and I looked down below us and we had a monster grizzly bear making its way to us. It had clearly picked up our scent. So we had just finished processing this mountain caribou and I'm like, okay, I want to get this out of here. I don't want to lose any meat to this bear. We had to load up everything on our backpacks and like motor out of this area. And again, you're at the top of this mountain and a caribou is not a small animal.
No.
So we were like running our bags across then heavy backpack across shale slides, across cliffs, faces. And what we were doing is we were shuttling it. So I'd load up with as much as I could take and I'd go as far as I possibly could. Then I'd dump the meat, dump everything there in a spot. And then I'd go all the way back, load up more, go back and forth and back and forth. And it's kind of like you take on that fourth quarter or overtime mentality where it's like, I'm bagged, I'm exhausted, everything, but this is everything I've worked for. So you put all of that aside and you're just like, this is the moment. This is what we trained for. Don't think about what could go wrong. Just you go into that like work mentality and you just start going.
Wow. That's insane. I've heard stories about that. You know, I've encountered like a little garter snake and I've been like freaked out. So I'm just trying to envision that because you're a big man. You're 6'7" and you're 270 pounds and you feel small towards a bear. I mean, that's insane.
These bears can be, 8+ feet, nose to tail. So when they stand on their back legs, they're 10, 11 feet tall.
How much would a bear weigh?
I wouldn't even, a grizzly bear probably could be anywhere, depending on its age, anywhere between 700 and 900 pounds plus. But there's the power. There's not a wasted ounce on a bear. It is pure power. And you watch them in the wild and you're like, oh, they look so calm and they look so dopey and docile. And the only reason they do that is because they are the most confident and cocky prick in the bush because they know they could mess everybody up. So they're like, I don't need to walk around and strut because I just know if anybody gets in my way, I will jack them up in a hurry.
That's insane. And so in terms of the meat, I'm a big game meat eater. I eat a lot of bison. Elk is like my favorite. Caribou is okay, but moose is my all-time favorite, right? What are three tips in terms of cooking that people should know about game meat, right? What are some tips that you could share on how to cook it? Because I had to learn how to cook it. It's different.
Yeah. Wild meat, well, the one big mistake a lot of people do is they try and cook wild meat like beef. And beef is a fatty meat. It's farm raised, it's marbled, and wild game meat is very different because it's typically very, very lean. So if you overcook it, it'll get dry. And then once it starts getting dry or it's overheated, that gaminess that everybody talks about comes out. That doesn't come out until the meat's been overheated or overcooked. So a lot of the time I tell people, if you can get it to temperature low and slow, you're probably not going to cook it. Like I like rare to medium rare is the sweet spot for wild game meat. If you go above that, it just gets dry and tough really, really fast. So I would say don't cook wild game meat like you cook beef. Number one, a good way to do that is to get yourself a good thermometer. A good thermometer while you're cooking will help you. Some of them now will tell you whether it's rare or medium rare, get you into that sweet spot. So that part is a big one for me. Sous vides, I would say, are one of the biggest cheat codes, man, because you can pick that internal temperature. I typically set my sous vide anywhere between the 124 to 126, and I put it in the bag. Sometimes I can put some seasoning in with it, but you put that in there. Then if you're a busy guy or busy gal, you can just throw it in the water. You're not going to get above that temperature. So you can bring it close to that rare, medium rare temperature and then just sear the outside when you're seasoning it. That's probably one of the bigger cheat codes I've found. And then a third one is just, find a seasoning that you like that goes along with it. Again, like there's a lot of specialized seasonings out there. I use one from High Mountain Seasonings a lot. It's pretty decent. Either learn how to make your own seasoning or spice mixes. That's the best one. But if you can't, there's some ones out there that make specialized wild game meat that can be like your typical run-of-the-mill grocery store ones, but they're modified slightly to go along with that wild game.
Okay. So you're saying there's actually spices that will enhance the flavor of the game meat.
Yeah, so there's like basically like you think of your typical grocery store Montreal steak spice. Like there's one that's called venison rub or venison spice from this company, and it's basically made to mimic Montreal steak spice, but formulated specifically to go on venison. So it gets you those same flavor profiles, but it balances out some of that quote unquote gaminess that some people talk about.
So from learning from sport, going back, what are, obviously you were telling me you're a dad, your wife works, you work a 9-to-5 job, plus you're the co-host of a TV show, plus you've got your fitness. What is one thing that you've learned from sport, or it could be a couple? What is something that you take away from the sport that you played that's helped you really be conscious or successful at each one of those categories? Like, what's something that you've learned that you've brought that skill with you everywhere you've went, and it's helped you in every department?
Preparedness is such a big, important thing, because things can go right like 80 to 90% of the time, but there's always those little moments where things can go wrong, and being prepared for the unexpected, being prepared for when you've got a caribou on the ground and a grizzly bear is coming in. It's not about preparing for like the perfect hunt. It's preparing for all the different things that could go wrong. And that, I'd say, is a big thing. Yeah. So like kind of like, study game film before a game, or study the game plan, go in and say, this is what I'm hoping happens, but think about a lot of the things that could go wrong along the way and try and be prepared for that. 'Cause that's what keeps you out of the ER, or make sure that you can actually come home from some of these hunts. So that, and just mindset training, understanding when the shit hits the proverbial, like when it hits the fan, being able to push through those situations and have like mental clarity and think fast. So like being on the line, you had to make quick call adjustments. Some of the times when you're out there in the field, you get split seconds to make decisions, and things can either work out or end up very, very bad. Just trying to keep that mental clarity as well out there is very important.
Yeah, I heard a quote once that if you just prepared for 15 to 30 minutes for most things, you'd be surprised how much better you would succeed at them, right? Like even just that little time, 15 to 30 minutes walking into an interview or a presentation, or thinking about your food for the day, or what activities does your son have, or what does your schedule look like, wife, and this is my schedule. How do we prepare a little bit more? Just that 15 minutes can change a whole trajectory of your day. Now, what is something... Obviously, you've been healthy your whole life. Your body is your business. Even to this date, you still use your body as your business. What are 3 things that you do for your health every day that are non-negotiables? They have to be done because that's what makes you feel the best.
Yeah, for me, it's get up in the morning and I start my day off with a win. So either, like I mentioned earlier, a run or a cardio of some sort. And when I can, I get to the gym as well for a workout. So I feel like getting my motor running in the morning, I get that mental clarity and that focus for the day. If I ever put it off because I'm too busy in the morning, I notice like I'm constantly fighting this fog all day. I get my workouts early in the morning. I try and have them done before my son gets up at 7. So I normally get up at 4:45, 5 a.m. I have my own mental time where I can sit down. Nobody's bugging me yet. Get some work done or read or just relax. Then I get my morning workout in, and I don't rush into my day. So that's something that's very important to me. And then around 5 o'clock, I make sure I have a shut-off time, because I work from home. So I have a hard shut-off time where I make sure it's like, hey, time for my wife and kid. Like I spend quality time with my wife and son. People in my office probably hate it because they're still trying to get in touch with me sometimes. And I'm just like, okay, can wait till tomorrow. Like, unless the building's burning, you can reach out to me tomorrow. So I make sure I kind of create that divide so I have a shut-off. I feel like a lot of people lost that during COVID because everybody started working from home and it's just around-the-clock job. And then I have a pretty solid evening routine. After we put Junior down, sometimes I'll have like an oatmeal before bed, but I have a tea, I relax, and I put myself into this sleep routine, which allows me to get a solid sleep. And you knew me back then as well. I'm a big believer in like measurables and analytics. So I track my sleep, I track my energy levels over time, and I've been able to find out what a successful evening routine is for me. And then that's what gives me the energy to wake up at 4:45 and do it all again the next day.
I think it comes down to preparedness again, right?
Exactly.
You work out to prepare your day to have a good day, and then you're conscious by 5 o'clock that it's got to be over, and then you prepare your body for sleep. I think we hear a lot of people talk about morning routines, and I always tell clients, yes, you need to have a morning routine to set up your day, but you also need to have an evening routine to set up your next 8-hour sleep, right? Because you do a 10-minute, people do a half an hour workout, they do a 15-minute warm up, they're going for 8 hours sleep, and they just think that they're going to stop scrolling, shut their brain off, and go right to bed. And they wonder why they don't feel rested.
It sounds nice on paper. It just doesn't happen that way. The reality of it is, you have to be prepared and have a system.
I have one last question for you as a person who likes to hike, not hunt yet. What is the best hiking shoe that you've seen work in all the, you've been all over the world. So what is the one that you generally go back to that has given you the best half-life out of it?
The best hiking boot that I run personally for me and what I do a lot of really stiff country hiking. So the brand's it's Crispy, and the boot model itself is the Brickstall Mountain SF. And it's got a really stiff sole and a lot of ankle support in there. So when you're hiking those steep climbs, you can kind of kick your toe and springboard yourself up a little bit. But it's a great boot. It's got a ton of stability in it, and that's what gives me the confidence, especially when I have that heavy pack. You can imagine the torque and tension on your ankles. So it helps me go through that. And just a solid all-around boot. And I've taken those boots all over the world, not just in BC, not just in Canada, but literally all over the world. Those are hands down my favorite boot for sure.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate your time. I love those hunting stories. Those are real life stories. But most importantly, I appreciate you just sharing what you do in the back end, right? Because we all see people and we all wonder, what do they do? And we think they have some magical or different life, but really you're trying to make it work just like all of us, right? You're trying to be a dad. You're trying to work. You're trying to be a good family man, be a good dad, accomplish your goals. And the rest is just try to do your best in every scenario. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best. Now, can you tell us where everybody can reach you? Do you want to do any shout outs to sponsors or anybody where they can reach you? Now's the time to let us know where everybody can follow you.
Yeah, if you want to give me a follow on. I talk about my fitness, nutrition, and all of my adventures on my Instagram. So it's just my first and last name. So Joe_Eppele. It's pretty simple on there. If you want to watch any of our shows or anything, you can watch us on Wild TV. You have to subscribe to the network, or you can get the Wild TV Plus app, and you can go on any app store, any smart device, and download that on there. And if you use code Big Joe, I think you save like 10%, but the subscription's like $30 for a year, and you can stream or watch all of our content on there. But yeah, a lot of it's just easily accessible on my Instagram. But other than that, I've appreciated this. It's been a long time since we caught up. I can't believe it's been 8+ years since we've been hanging out and running around in Ottawa. But it's been an absolute blast catching up with you, and hopefully it won't be this long before we do it again.
No, appreciate your time. Thank you.